What rookies are going to make an impact right away for fantasy football in 2025? That's the question that we're going to be answering today, because the new rookies are the shiny new toys. Everybody is super excited about them. And there's a lot of people out there that will try to convince you that veterans are going to lose their jobs, or these rookies are going to be absolute studs, and whatever it may be. However, that is not always the case. So we need to try and figure out which rookies are actually worth higher draft picks for fantasy football in 2025. And then we'll talk about later in the week what rookies you may want to skip on and go for those veteran picks instead, because they're not going to have the impact you think right away. But let me be clear, this video is only about 2025. There's several other rookies that we could add to this list that will be studs at some point in their NFL career. But to kick things off, maybe they won't get the volume. Maybe they won't have quite the impact that you would like. And because of that, they may be overdrafted in 2025, and you should end up staying away from them. But these guys that we're talking about today, nope, they're going to kick off their careers with a bang, and in 2025, you should be investing in them. And I think it's no shock that you're going to see Ashton Genty first on this list. Heading to the Las Vegas Raiders, he was easily one of the best fits for the Las Vegas Raiders in this draft, and they made it work. But it's not necessarily how good of a fit he's going to be, but it's going to be the fact that we know Pete Carroll, the new head coach in Las Vegas, loves to run the football. During his Seattle days, he had this same type of offensive scheme. Geno Smith is in his offense now. He had Geno Smith at one point, but he's very similar to what Russell Wilson did as well in Seattle. And maybe what we saw from Marshawn Lynch in Seattle is what we'll see from Genty in Las Vegas. If you look at the bookends of his career in Seattle as the head coach, the running game stalled a little bit at the very beginning and at the very end. But for all the years in between, when they had a very solid run game, Pete Carroll ran the football. From 2012 to 2019, Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks were top 3 in rushing attempts 6 times. They absolutely ran the football, and they were darn good with it as well. Now, they did have Marshawn Lynch, and they had other running backs that they were able to be successful with. But Ashton Genty is going to be very similar to what we saw Marshawn Lynch do for this same type of offense when Pete Carroll was in Seattle. Now, maybe the Raiders are not top 3 in rushing attempts this season, but it's definitely possible that they finish inside the top 10. And a majority of those carries obviously will go to Genty. And if he is a guy that finishes inside the top 10 of most rushing attempts this year, he's absolutely going to be a running back 1 type of player. He's going to be considered as a first round draft pick. If I could get him in the second round, that would make me feel a whole lot better about drafting him, but we're going to have to see how the ADP shakes out. But in 2025, he'll still be a stud no matter what. Personally, I hate to see that the Nick Chubb era is over in Cleveland, but they needed to do something to get the run game going once again. And by drafting Quinshon Judkins in the second round, that was exactly what this offense needed to start balancing things out. Now, the Browns did end up adding Dylan Sampson a little bit later on in the draft, and they still have Jerome Ford on the roster as well. But Judkins is going to be the RB1 for the Browns, and he's going to be the guy getting the bulk of the carries as the RB1. 2024 was the first season of Kevin Stefanski's career is either a head coach or an offensive coordinator where his offense did not rank inside the top 10 of rushing attempts. As the offensive coordinator in Minnesota and then as the head coach in Cleveland, his offense had 5 straight seasons inside the top 10 of rushing attempts. And of those seasons, all but one of them, they were inside the top 5. And during that stretch, there was only one season where they finished outside the top 10 in rushing yards or rushing touchdowns. So we know Kevin Stefanski is going to want to stay balanced and run the football. It's also going to be important to note the quarterback situation for Cleveland this year. You've got Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett as the leaders in the clubhouse. And then you drafted Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. So more than likely, you're going to see one of the two pickups as the veterans be the quarterback for the entire season. If it's Joe Flacco, he can still sling the football, and that's going to help keep teams off the run game nearly as much. Kenny Pickett would worry me a little bit more. He is a guy that's been very inconsistent. If he can't push the ball down the field, then teams might collapse on the run game. And hopefully we don't see Gabriel or Sanders in 2025. If we can get Flacco for 17 games or so, then this run game should work out very, very well. And Judkins should be a flex option at the very least almost every single week. Sean Payton has been looking for a difference maker at the running back position his first 2 years in Denver. And unfortunately, he's had a carousel of running backs to try and figure it out, and no one has really been able to step up. But now they have RJ Harvey. And even though his draft capital was much higher than what a lot of people expected, it was well worth it. After being picked at the end of the second round, it's difficult to imagine that the Denver Broncos don't believe that RJ Harvey is a guy that can carry the workload in Denver. And I absolutely believe he will as well. He was a guy that I had my eye on during the pre-draft process. But then when I did my most explosive running backs in college football video, I saw some absolute insane numbers from RJ Harvey, as he was absolutely one of the most explosive running backs in this year's draft class. And with a passing game led by Bo Nix that threw the ball all over the place last season, adding RJ Harvey is going to not only help keep things balanced, but it's going to offer an opportunity for some big plays as well. See, Sean Payton was the head coach in New Orleans for 15 seasons. And in all but 4 of those seasons, the New Orleans Saints ranked higher in rushing touchdowns than they did in rushing attempts. And for 8 of those 11 seasons, the New Orleans Saints ranked outside the top 10 in rushing attempts in the NFL, but they were inside the top 5 of rushing touchdowns. So even if you're overly concerned about the amount of volume RJ Harvey may end up getting, he's going to be getting an opportunity to score. And those touchdowns are really what could end up pushing his fantasy scores up into the RB2 area. So it's going to be about efficiency and scoring touchdowns. But personally, if you have an argument against RJ Harvey being the RB1, I would love to hear it, because Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin have done nothing to earn that title over Harvey at this point. Give me Harvey as the RB1 and give me him as a solid RB2 this season that, if he scores enough touchdowns, will also kick in some RB1 upside. When you think about the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously you think about that hard-nosed, tough football, maybe just run the football right at people, tackle well, beat people down until they're ready to give up. That's what the Pittsburgh Steelers brand has always been about. So maybe this is a really interesting fact for you. Because even though over the last 3 seasons, the Pittsburgh Steelers were inside the top 10 of rushing attempts, these were the first years since 2010 that the Steelers were inside the top 10. And even though they were inside the top 10 of most rushing attempts this past season, they haven't been inside the top 10 for rushing yards since 2007, Mike Tomlin's first year as the head coach in Pittsburgh. Maybe that changes this year, drafting Caleb Johnson in the 3rd round. Now, I wasn't as high on Caleb Johnson as some other people were. I definitely see the value in him, but he reminds me a lot of Najee Harris over the last few years. A guy that could get an exceptional amount of work, but doesn't have a ton of upside. Yeah, Najee Harris has ran for 1,000 yards each of the last 4 seasons. He's the only running back in the NFL to do that. But getting to those 1,000-yard seasons hasn't always been the easiest. Because during that time, his highest yards per attempt was only 4.1. During the course of his career, he's been at 3.9, 3.8, 4.1, and 4.0. and he's only averaged 62 or more yards per game in one season. Najee Harris was the epitome of a guy that did just enough with the volume that he was given. But his high upside intangibles that we saw in college did not translate into this Pittsburgh offense. And you have to wonder if the same thing will end up holding true for Caleb Johnson, who might be a little less explosive than what we saw from Najee Harris coming out of college. We could end up seeing a lot of the same thing, a ton of carries for Caleb Johnson, but unfortunately not the type of upside where he finds himself consistently as a high upside top 12 play. And if Jaylen Warren is healthy for the entire season, can you really keep his playmaking ability on the bench more times than not? He averaged 4.9 yards per attempt and 5.3 yards per attempt his first 2 years in the league. Unfortunately, last year, he was banged up a majority of the time, and he just didn't seem like the same ball carrier. But running for 1,000 yards in a season doesn't just automatically equate to RB1 numbers. Najee Harris, the last 3 seasons, finished as the RB20, the RB20, and the RB14. The only time he finished inside the top 12 was all the way back in his rookie year when he finished as the RB4. But that was a season in which he had 74 receptions on 92 targets. And I don't see Caleb Johnson getting that type of work in the passing game with Jaylen Warren and Cordarrelle Patterson being there. We also know Arthur Smith can be really hard to read as he likes to screw up his own offense more times than not. Now, a lot of this conversation may feel like it was a negative towards Caleb Johnson, and it wasn't. It was about tempering expectations, because I feel like people look at Caleb Johnson and see that he was drafted in the 3rd round with decent draft capital to the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that you feel like is going to pound the football. This is more about, hey, even though it is a great fit and I like what he could possibly do there, to me personally, Caleb Johnson is an RB2 type of player with his upside. Does he find the end zone and have some RB1 weeks? Absolutely, that could happen. But if you draft him as like your RB3, feeling like you could put him in the flex most weeks, and then he could be an RB2 with his ceiling, you're not going to hate that type of upside. But if you draft him as your RB2, hoping for a lot of RB1 weeks, that's where things could get complicated for you, and your roster will underwhelm you with the upside it presents every single week. Caleb Johnson is a great fit, and I think he's going to have a fabulous rookie season. I think for running for 1,000 yards is absolutely on the table, but scoring double-digit touchdowns and getting enough receiving work to make him a high upside play every single week is why I won't be drafting him any more than being depth and a safety blanket for my team. I know a lot of people are still looking at Bryce Young as a bust, and he hasn't really done a whole lot to push that narrative to the side. Unless you look at the last 3 games of 2024, which, yes, I agree, it's a small sample size, but it doesn't mean that we should just completely ignore it. But those 3 games are a big reason why I think Tet McMillan can be an impact player in the NFL right away. Over his last 3 games of the season, Bryce Young threw for 612 yards, 7 touchdowns, and no interceptions. And 2 of those games were against playoff teams. The Atlanta Falcons, who were battling for that NFC South title up until the last week, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who eventually ended up winning it. And look at the weapons that Bryce Young had last season to work with. Tet McMillan is head and shoulders above all of these guys. You've got Adam Thielen, who is getting ready to start drawing on his Social Security. You've got Xavier Leggett. He's a decent X receiver, but he's not a number 1 guy. You've got Jalen Coker, who, yeah, he showed some promise last season, but he's not a number 1 player. And then Deontay Johnson, who's been passed around more by NFL teams than some of these OnlyFans girls. And we know David Canales wants to pass the football. It's what his background is in the NFL. He's coached quarterbacks and he's coached wide receivers. In Seattle, before he became the offensive coordinator for Tampa Bay, he was the passing game coordinator. So this is his background. They're going to start throwing the football, and they have a solid run game with Chuba Hubbard and a couple of backups to really keep pushing the football on the ground and give Bryce Young some better looks over the top. Ted McMillan is a guy that can win all over the field. I think he's going to lead this team in targets, and if they are more competitive this season than what they have been in years past, that's definitely going to be a good thing. My biggest question mark: how often will he find the end zone? Will it be enough to give you wide receiver 2 type numbers, or will he find himself more as a wide receiver 3 this season? This offseason, when Josh Jacobs said the Green Bay Packers needed a wide receiver 1, apparently the front office was listening, because they finally decided to use a first-round pick on a wide receiver, Matthew Golden, and then added Savion Williams out of TCU a few rounds later. And I'm sorry, Matthew Golden is already the most talented wide receiver in Green Bay, and he hasn't even stepped on an NFL field as of yet. So how are they not going to give him a plethora of targets this season? Christian Watson is probably going to miss almost the entire year. He's inconsistent as well. Jaden Reed also inconsistent. Can't seem to catch a football to save his life at times. Dontavian Wick seems to be hurt quite often. Romeo Doubs seems to be hurt quite often. Matthew Golden, if he stays healthy, should see 100 targets in this offense in 2025. Jordan Love has been looking for this type of playmaker. Matthew Golden is that guy. I mean, even if the Packers stay balanced and they continue to pound the football with Josh Jacobs, which I expect them to do, they've been very good over the last few seasons of outperforming the amount of passing attempts they actually have. For instance, last season they were 30th in passing attempts, but 12th in passing yards. The year before that, 15th in attempts, 12th in yards. The year before that, 18 and 17, 15 and 8. 24 and 9. So over the past several seasons, the Green Bay Packers, even though they haven't been a high upside passing volume team, they make the most of it with a lot of big plays, something Matthew Golden knows a whole lot about. Matthew Golden definitely has an opportunity to find himself as a high upside wide receiver 2 right away in 2025. Does he follow the rookie trajectory that we saw from guys like Malik Neighbors, Jamar Chase, things of that nature? Probably not, but he's going to be a wide receiver 1 some weeks, and he's definitely going to be coveted as a big play guy. Trey Harris to the Chargers in the second round may be overlooked as an immediate impact type of draft pick. People might be playing the long game with him, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but I also think that he could be a big playmaker right off the bat, because the things that he does well are things that they don't have anybody else doing well right now. We know the Chargers are going to run the football. They signed Najee Harris this offseason and drafted Omarion Hampton in the first round. They are absolutely going to run the football at their opponents. It's the Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman way. So that will happen with an offensive line that has been built back up over the last season. But we also know that Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey were a huge connection last year. But Ladd McConkey is not that deep threat type of wide receiver. That was supposed to be either Quentin Johnston or it was supposed to be Josh Palmer. And the Chargers still do have Quentin Johnston on the roster, and they brought back Mike Williams as well. But Trey Harris is going to be the guy that will be way more consistent on the outside. Earlier in this video, you heard me talk about the most explosive running backs video from college that I did that showed us that RJ Harvey was a big playmaker and that where he was drafted actually matches up with some of his college production. The same thing could be said about Trey Harris as well. His college production shows some big play explosive ability, and if he can stretch the field and catch way more consistently than what Quentin Johnston or Mike Williams can, he could become the number 2 target on this offense very, very quickly. But not only did that video showcase Trey Harris as a guy, but it showcased this next guy, one of my ultimate sleepers in this draft that I absolutely loved, Kyle Williams. I saw very few people talking about Kyle Williams prior to the NFL draft. And like I mentioned, he was one of the biggest names that we talked about and my most explosive wide receivers from college last season. Kyle Williams does a lot of things very well. And as of right now, it feels like and look like the Patriots are going to try to work him into the slot, where Demario Douglas has really kind of been the most consistent playmaker the last couple of years. But Drake May needs new weapons, and Kyle Williams being in the slot exclusively doesn't feel like it's a great fit, because Matt Collins is on the outside as well, who has been serviceable during his NFL career, but once again, the Patriots need playmakers. Stephon Diggs, when exactly is he going to be healthy, and when exactly is he going to be 100%? And even when he's back to 100%, is he going to be as explosive as he was, or it's going to take a little bit of time? Matt Collins, yep, serviceable, nothing to really write home about. Demario Douglas has seen a decent amount of targets, but what he does with the targets doesn't really equate to high fantasy upside. You've got Hunter Henry, who's up and down as well, but is really more of a red zone threat now in his career. Kyle Williams has a great opportunity. Drake May needs people to throw to. The offensive line, they've worked on getting that better. They've reinforced the run game a little bit, so now you've got a couple of guys in Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevens in there. Kyle Williams could be a deep play threat. He could be a guy over the middle of the field. When talent is on your roster, especially young talent like this New England team right now, they are the ones that should get the most looks. And if he can have a really solid training camp and look good even in preseason games, while he might not be one of the main guys to start the year, it's going to be hard to control Kyle Williams and his high upside for very long. Headliner Nation, this video was a lot of fun because even though the NFL draft is over, there was so much research I did about rookies this offseason that it's great to start talking about them in terms of their NFL teams now. So even though we've done rankings and things prior to them being drafted, we have a much more clear picture on the guys that can make an immediate impact. And those were some of the guys that I talked about today. Yeah, maybe I didn't mention a guy like Omari and Hampton, because even though I love him with the Los Angeles Chargers, there is an opportunity where it could be a little up and down this season because they already have Najee Harris. But for me, he is a top 12 running back next year and beyond, assuming that Najee Harris doesn't re-sign with the Chargers in 2026. So again, when you look at these rookies, there are guys that will make immediate impacts. There are guys who will be probably good to start, and there might be some guys who are more of a long-term value. If they're more of a long-term value, or maybe don't make the impact we would like right away, they weren't included in this video, but we may talk about them later on this season. You can also find more about them in our 2025 football draft guide. And if you're looking to get yours right now, you're gonna find a guide that is chock full of rookie scouting reports, dynasty rankings, and rookie rankings. But as the summer goes on, you're gonna find so much redraft content being added, it will make your head spin. Make sure you get yours ordered right now. Start diving into all the offseason research that you need and get ready for the 2025 season. Headliner Nation, I'm gonna get out of here. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.